This is part 8 of What the Camera Saw. What really happened to Gail Sherwood on June 1st, 2008. In this series, we've analyzed many things that the camera saw, and we've considered these things alongside other evidence available to police in this case. And all of this evidence brings us to one main question, and that is what explanation best fits all of the facts and evidence in this case. Is Gail a liar and a fantasist, or is she somebody who was actually raped and stalked by a person, by the same man over a period of many years? Well, I think that the explanation that best fits all of the facts and the evidence is that Gail has been telling the truth all along. Gail was truthful in telling police that there was a disturbance at her home that caused her to get out of bed 3 times and check on that disturbance. The man causing the disturbance was caught on camera, and Gail's account was also corroborated by a number of other lights that corroborate her account of going down to check on what was going on. This man entered her home through the patio door, and he knocked her unconscious with the bottle that was found laying on the living room floor. Gail was then, after being knocked unconscious, was carried out to her car by 2 people who knew about the camera. These 2 individuals took a photo of her laying on the ground as they unlocked the van, and then they loaded her into the cargo area. And as they walked from the house to the car, their presence there was obscured by the darkness and also by the shrubs that really make it difficult to see anything below from waist height and down. And then they were also obscured by the car itself. So they avoided detection because of the car and because of the shrubs and all of the things that obscured the camera view. So this activity of loading Gail into the back of the car and taking a photo of her back there explains the 26-second delay in the driver entering the vehicle. Once that was finished, the accomplice then walked around to the driver's side door, got in the car, and drove the car out of camera range while Gail's assailant walked down the drive in a way that avoided the camera. At some point, the accomplice exited the car and the rapist took over driving. But before he did that, he moved Gail to the front seat, reclining it since she was unconscious. The rapist would have used Gail's dog coat to obscure the rapist would have used her dog coat, which he would have found in the back of the car, to obscure her in case anyone observed him, so that they wouldn't notice that he was carrying somebody who had been gagged and restrained. At this point, he had to recline the front seat because Gail was unconscious and unable to sit up. And at some point, the car stopped and the accomplice got out, and the rapist took over driving. I don't know exactly when that was, but I surmise that it happened once the car was far enough from Gail's house to prevent the camera from picking up any brake lights or headlights associated with stopping and starting again. The accomplice may have been on hand as well to fulfill another purpose. He or she may have remained near Gail's home, watching the home, in order to alert the rapist if anyone started to look for Gail or call the police. They could have called or texted the rapist on their mobile phone and let them know. So that's what I think happened, and explains all the evidence. And that also brings us to this question: does the camera evidence provide more support for a rape or for a false report? And I raise that because in the Rape Then Jail Training Bulletin, one thing that we've noted there is that it is difficult to understand how these false reporting prosecutions are proceeding because there is often more evidence to support the charge of sexual assault committed by the suspect than there is to support the charge of false reporting by the victim. And this is a case where we see that is actually the case. So what is the evidence in this case that supports the police's notion that there was a false report here? The main evidence is this poor quality driver footage, which the police say is Gail, and which they also claim means that she made the whole thing up, even though the footage does not directly prove that she was not raped. There is no other footage available from the camera that the camera picked up that supports the notion that Gail is a fantasist and made up all these claims of being raped and stalked. Now, what about the evidence that the camera provides in support of the rape? First, there's the unidentified man walking on Gail's drive an hour before the alleged abduction that the camera picked up. Second, is the fact that the camera saw lights inside and outside the home that corroborated Gail's account of a disturbance. Third, the fact that vehicle lights picked up by the camera indicate a second unknown person was dropped off at the property, and this person was clearly not a family member or a neighbor. Fourth, the crucial point that police never identified and questioned either of these unknown individuals who were in the area that night shortly before the abduction. Number 5 is the fact that the camera did not see Gail leaving her home of her own volition. There's no record of Gail voluntarily departing that night. Number 6, the camera confirms that Gail did not use the front door for her departure as she normally does. We never see that door open. Number 7, it's suspicious that the person who unlocks the car door does not appear on camera. Gail would have appeared on camera. She didn't know it was there. She would have unlocked the car as she walked out of her house. So why is it that we never see the person who's unlocking the car door? That is very unusual. Number 8, the camera reveals aspects of the driver's behavior that don't match Gail's conduct. Using the brake as the driver's going down the driveway that is very steep, not wearing a seatbelt, driving away from the property with no headlights. All of those mannerisms and behaviors suggest that somebody other than Gail drove the car that night. And then finally, number 9, the camera reveals a 26-second delay between the car being unlocked and entered, enough time for Gail to be loaded into the cargo area of the van. There's also further evidence in this case supporting the rape, and some of this evidence is not what I focused on in this video because I've been focusing on what the camera saw, but this is other evidence we have to consider alongside the camera evidence. So number 1, Gail was found gagged and tied tightly to a fence. Number 2, she had injuries consistent with sexual assault in her genital region. She also had severe bruising to her right breast as a result of being thrown on the ground. Number 3, she was extremely cold and highly distressed when she was found. Number 4, she has never in her life, either before or since June 1st of 2008, left her home unsecured in the middle of the night, particularly with her daughters and her dogs asleep inside. Daughters and her dogs, the people and the animals that matter more to her than anything in the world. Why would she leave her home unsecured with her children inside? Her grown daughters, her daughters are now grown, and they can confirm that Gail has never, before or since June 1st, left her home unsecured in the middle of the night without telling them where she was going. So if we're going to say that Gail did this just one time in her life, that is tremendously out of character for her. Number 5, why did police not call Child Protective Services as a result? If Gail truly ran off and faked a rape in the middle of the night, she was endangering her children by leaving the house unlocked. And Haley, her oldest, was an adult. But still, Haley was not told she was leaving. So if she genuinely did this, that would have been a call to Child Protective Services, but the police never did that. Number 6, the details that Gail could provide about what happened to her, such as the detail of how she had difficulty assembling her phone because the bits of rubber glove the rapist had put on her hands kept getting in the way. Details like that come from lived experience. Fabricating such a detailed account would be incredibly labor-intensive. And this relates into point number 7 here, which is that police searched Gail's home, and they never obtained any evidence supporting their theory that she had staged fake rapes. Number 8, other people also saw Gail's stalker. Other people saw suspicious activity, and they witnessed cards and flowers being delivered under circumstances where Gail could not be responsible for doing so because she was with the witnesses, and they could see what she was doing the whole time. And then number 9, finally, Gail's family and close friends have never wavered in their belief that Gail has been telling the truth these last 15 plus years. So we can see that this is a situation, a case, where there is far more evidence supporting the theory that Gail is telling the truth than the theory that she somehow lied about being raped and stalked. So if this is the case, then how and why did police arrive at the conclusion that Gail lied about the stalking and the rapes, particularly when they had no evidence to go on? Well, we've seen that at the beginning of this investigation, they had already taken the view that she was a liar, and they looked for evidence that would support this preconceived notion. And they did this by cherry-picking the evidence and relying on confirmation bias. That is, they only considered the evidence that supported their beliefs, and they ignored all of the other evidence. They ignored all of the other voluminous evidence that indicated that Gail really was being stalked and raped. For instance, they seized on the poor quality driver footage while completely ignoring the footage of a man walking on Gail's property, never bothering to consider what his presence meant, and never attempting to identify and interview him. And they never dug deeply enough into the rest of the footage to pick up on the second person on Gail's property and the other ways that the footage corroborated her account. The police also committed procedural errors with the investigation. They failed to conduct a thorough investigation into her case, even aborting some aspects of the investigation once they decided to focus on the driver footage. For instance, they arrested Gail for false reporting without awaiting DNA test results from the second rape. They decided they didn't need to because they already knew she was lying. They charged her despite key evidence going missing from a secure police evidence room. Specifically, the fact that the key was gone meant that the stalker rapist may have had access to it and could have planned to abduct her in her own car because he knew he had the key. And then why did the police install a hidden camera that did not capture the patio door when Gail had reported that her assailant had entered through that door? That was a very significant oversight that limited the effectiveness of even having a hidden camera. And then there's the accountability issue. The police were able to get away with such a spectacular failure because they had no accountability mechanisms in place to ensure that all cases are thoroughly and appropriately investigated. That allowed them to get away with this. Where do you, if you're the rape victim accused of false reporting, how do you rectify an error like this? Who can you go to tell the police you need to reinvestigate? You need to look at this again because maybe you've made a mistake. So police here, in this case, did what was expedient for them because they wanted to resolve this and get this case off their plate as quickly as possible. They didn't approach this case with an interest in the truth. Accusing Gail of false reporting was a way of silencing a woman who had become quite bothersome to them because she was repeatedly calling for help over crimes that the police were unable to solve with the training, expertise, and resources available to them at the time. So by throwing her under the bus, they were able to make themselves look like heroes and geniuses for solving a difficult case. But the reality is much different. Gail Sherwood is a survivor of very serious crimes that have never been solved, and she spent time in prison for asking the police for help. No one should have to endure what she has endured. It is my hope that this presentation will help people understand Gail Sherwood's case and the miscarriage of justice that has occurred here. It is also my hope that this presentation will inspire more police officers to do the great work on sexual assault investigations that we know is possible, work like that done by FBI agent Lori Bandor and by Colorado officers Stacy Galbraith and Edna Hendershot, work that is done every day by police officers who care deeply about providing the best possible service for victims. If you are a law enforcement officer looking to improve your agency's response to sexual assault, you will find a wide range of high-quality resources at the website of End Violence Against Women International and at their annual conferences. Be sure to check them out. Thank you very much for your interest in Gail Sherwood's case.